So our next speakers are going to be Neil Bennett and Laura Transu presenting Building Student Confidence and Competency while Teaching Media Production Online.
Welcome to Building Confidence and Competency while Teaching Media Production Online with Neil Bennett from the School of Communication and Information and Laura Transu from the Division of Continuing Studies, Media Services. Hello, my name is Neil Bennett. I'm currently an instructor of professional practice at Rutgers University's School of Communication and Information in the Journalism and Media Studies Department. I teach multiple creative media practice production courses that I've developed for the department, including digital media production, electronic field production, non-scripted television, television studio courses, and multimedia video editing. I'm a member of the Journalism and Media Studies Curriculum Committee, and in addition to being full-time faculty with the department, I also provide consulting and production services for the Division of Continuing Studies ITV Studio and work with Laura Transu and her students.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Transu. I am the supervisor of the Scarlet Media student team, which is part of the Division of Continuing Studies Media Services. This is a great team of anywhere between 6 to 10 students who are student workers providing videography services for various clients at the university. They also support the diverse media services our media services team provides, so they both do their own projects for their own clients and support the projects that the full-time staff are working on. This way they gain hands-on experience with real projects and real clients, but in a very supportive setting where they can apply their skills from the classroom to a situation outside the classroom and work with students that they may not ever have the chance to be in a class with, students from different majors, different walks of life, different schools. So it's a really unique team. And we're lucky enough that we get to work with Neil Bennett when he's consulting at the studio and when he brings his classes to the television studio on the Livingston campus for a tour or a hands-on learning experience. Since Neil and I both work with students interested in media production, we found over the past year that we had a lot in common in terms of facing the challenges of adapting our teaching and work and the type of student experience that we wanted to facilitate to the remote setting that we have all been in. And in our discussions, we came up with some general points of focus that we felt we had in common and that helped us figure out how to adapt to these challenges and how to be successful. Point of focus 1, hands-on somehow. We want to provide students with the practical experience that they're looking for from the course or work experience that we're providing. Although the way that we're providing a hands-on experience may be very different, what's more important is to make sure they're getting some kind of hands-on experience that supports the fundamentals they're going to apply to any type of production they're working on. Our second common point of focus was focusing on creative community. Students in a media production course or doing a media production work experience would traditionally work very intensely with their colleagues when creating their work. We don't want to lose this just because we are in a remote setting. That kind of community is vital to feeling validated as a creator and an artist and to producing the best kind of media product that is a mixture of multiple people contributing their ideas and their effort to it. And our third point of focus was setting boundaries and setting expectations for both yourself and for the students so that no one's getting overworked and you're reducing the amount of confusion and anxiety people are feeling as they're trying to navigate this different situation. Of course, Neil and I are in slightly different settings, Neil teaching courses and me working with student workers. So we're going to go through examples of how we applied these concepts in our different settings. Hands-on somehow. How did I apply this to the Scarlet Media setting? Once I realized that this pandemic was going to go on for more than a few weeks, I really had to change my mindset from a deprivation mindset in terms of what we didn't have access to a mindset of abundance, focusing on what do we have access to and how can we make this work. And once I did that, I realized that we had a lot of resources at our disposal as part of our division and as part of Rutgers University. We had access to software, we had access to web based tools that students could use to create things like tutorials that didn't necessarily need to be shot in person, but could be represented graphically. Students could access our server, so they still had access to all of their project files and all of the footage from projects that we were working on when the pandemic hit, and continued to have access to any new files that full-time staff were creating or footage from shoots that continued to go on throughout the pandemic. Although shooting in person still remains a challenge, we were able to find ways to integrate individual or pairs of students who felt comfortable returning to campus for a specific shoot here or there. It was also important to maintain a focus on the fundamentals that apply across formats. The things that really make a media product successful are things like story, design, editing in terms of pacing, building tension, building emotion. These things are universal regardless of what type of platform you're editing on and what you're using to create your media product. Maintaining focus on those types of things means that the students are really building strong foundational skills that they can apply to any type of equipment or software that they're going to be working with. They will be ready to go. And because our team is very open and collaborative, I made sure to maintain transparency about what the challenges we were facing were and integrated the students into the troubleshooting. So I had students working with me to figure out how to do things like virtual directing, how to edit 360 video and produce 360 tours because we're getting a lot of requests for those type of projects, and even doing things like running their own live showcase of their film work. Alongside the full-time staff, these students are working with us to figure out how to find technical solutions, which is a great real-world experience.
While Laura was working on developing a plan for her students at Scarlet Media, in the classroom setting, from an instructor's perspective, one of the first things I wanted to assess when I found out we were moving to a full time online remote setting was what type of technology will our students have access to outside of the classroom? In our face to face classes, we had about 10 camera packages, lighting kits, audio equipment, and some basic grip gear. And in addition to that, we also had some portable switchers with streaming capabilities for the bigger multi camera group projects. So early in the pandemic, I realized there was going to be no way for students to access our equipment from the classroom. So based on that, I developed a questionnaire for the students, asking various questions about their cell phone recording capabilities, how the audio sounded, what types of inputs were on their cell phones. I even wanted to learn how reliable their internet was, upload and download speeds, specs for their home computers, such as operating systems, hard drive space, and RAM, along with budgets for purchasing books. Knowing their budget for books helped me gauge what type of equipment I could recommend for them to purchase to support some of the upcoming production assignments. Based on the feedback, I was able to determine what technology students had access to and what I'd need to help provide. Fortunately, we were able to set up remote access to the computer lab workstations, as well as provide free semester-long licenses to the Adobe Cloud apps. I also found some great cloud-based apps for recording and editing audio and video on Chromebooks. Another major change to moving production online included revising the syllabi and the assignments. One major assignment change, for example, originally included a live multi-camera production, which I changed to a webinar that needed to include video roll-ins, interactive segments, and audio follow-up feedback. Instead of the live presentation taking place at a venue, we now try to mirror this in an online peer-to-peer conference platform, which is what was starting to take place as common practice with the changing landscape. Instead of a live town hall recorded multicam with an audience, we now had the audience and presenter all remote, each person in a different location.
Facilitating creative community is so important to Scarlet Media. Scarlet Media's hallmark is really the relationship the students have with each other and with our staff. It's a very collaborative environment, and there's great camaraderie between the students and the staff. To lose this would mean basically losing the meaning and heart behind Scarlet Media. So it's vital that we found ways to maintain this in the remote work setting. Early on, I realized that our remote work was not really reproducing the type of experience that I wanted the students to have in this way. Once I was able to stop being reactive to the immediate needs of the situation, I realized that I really needed to be intentional about building structure into the way we were going to do things remotely so that we didn't lose this vital part of our community. In the office, normally 3 students would be working side by side at edit stations and would be going on shoots together. So, really having a very intense and close relationship, working with each other to exchange ideas and ask for help from each other, get tips and tricks from each other. So, in collaboration with the students, I began to integrate small projects alongside our traditional work that would help these students maintain connection to each other and allow them to be a little bit more creative and take ownership of certain projects. This led to projects like a podcast where they practiced audio recording, audio editing, as well as planning the entire thing. So, thinking about the audience, thinking about what questions and what guests they wanted to have, and meeting deadlines that they set together. They did an animation project, a stop motion animation project, where they all wrote the scripts and then swapped them around and edited a script that was written by one of the other students. They also put together a showcase of their own film work and even had a live Q&A with the directors via YouTube, and anyone could tune in to watch. This has really enabled us to maintain the creative community that we would have had in person. And some of these students have even mentioned that normally they wouldn't even see a particular student because their shifts were different. But now that they're working remotely, they can quickly have a meeting via Zoom or via Slack and have been able to create bonds with students that they maybe wouldn't have actually been that close to, even if we were in person. So they were having these interactions on their own terms, setting up their own meetings, and were engaged in these projects because they had creative control over them. And I will also mention these projects were not just random, fun side projects that we did, they were often test cases for other types of services that we wanted to try out. Or technical processes that we needed to practice or we needed to try to figure out how to do them better. So these projects served multiple purposes in terms of maintaining community, but also definitely contributing back to our unit as a whole.
In the face to face production classes, it was easy to facilitate a creative community. Production, by its nature, is a collaborative environment, but when you move this type of instruction into an online community, that changes quite a bit. I create and/or revise my modules on a weekly basis to reflect the class dynamics. I believe it keeps the content fresh and up to date, as well as including elements from student work done in the previous modules. Weekly feedback is another great way to have students engage creatively with one another. I utilize Canvas's peer reviews to auto-generate a small group to review and provide feedback directly to other students. I have each student work directly with other students in their group to provide specific feedback about their current progress. I found this to be much more engaging and helpful compared to the discussion pages, where posts get lost in this long thread of comments. After students post their peer reviews, I go in and provide my feedback and can comment directly to that student and include additional comments relating to their classmates' feedback. I believe this provides a well-rounded group of ideas from both the instructor and their peers as they continue the creative media production process. I also provide a similar process with group projects. The progress of a group along with the content being developed for an assignment is shared with the class for feedback and suggestions during the process. This way, everyone in the class is seeing what other students are working on, and new ideas are constantly getting generated, along with the bar constantly being raised as each group sees what the others are developing. Some of my students have produced podcasts and videos about burnout, something I didn't really consider until I spent some time talking this over with some of my students. So, in this time of remote learning and teaching, I realized it was important to be flexible, starting with my office hours, then also providing one on one Zoom meetings and some small group or individualized training sessions, or even video tutorials specifically for one or two students needing that extra help. I also found that instead of trying to squeeze all of the content on one, two, or three pages of a module, that announcements have become a great way to introduce some additional elements throughout the week that seems to help make the module initially less overwhelming for the student. I also like to keep it light with additional tips that may include shortcuts for editing or something new I learned in the field on a freelance gig. And lastly, I've become okay with adjusting some due dates in the original syllabus. I realize everyone's schedule has become shaken up a bit in the past year, and perhaps some additional time may be needed. I try to get a good sense of the class dynamics and adjust as needed throughout the semester.
So, in summary, we hope that what we have presented here has given you some ideas and maybe a framework for how to engage with your students around media, art, technology in the remote and hybrid world. Our three principles, as we've been saying, are hands on learning and practical skills, creative community collaboration and exchange, and setting healthy boundaries and expectations for everyone involved. But really, we encourage you to let the essentials that make sense for your course or your student experience guide you. And the last piece of advice we'll leave you with is don't sweat the small stuff until you need to. You don't necessarily need to worry about how to use a piece of technology or how to facilitate something until you decided that you really need to do it. So figure out those big questions, figure out those essentials first, and then figure out the fine details for how to accomplish it. It'll become a lot clearer once you have those foundational decisions made. With that, we will now take any questions that you have.
Hey everybody, welcome to our presentation. Thank you for sticking around. And yeah, feel free if you have any questions about what we've talked about, or if you're in a similar situation. I think one of the big things that we ran into, Laura and I working together over at ITV and working with students, was really just trying to figure out the best way to still provide these students with the technology and access to the equipment and software so they can continue to create online. So thanks, Dave. Some of the things that I think really worked for us was, I think, that the support of the production community, really. Right away, we had Adobe working with us and allowing students to extend trials. That worked out really well. We started to find more and more I'd say like post-production materials, I guess, where they were allowing students free access for a while. So that really helped out. I felt like we got very lucky where we had a lot of students already with cell phones that can record very good quality. But the challenge there was having them, be able to record and then edit that footage. So really what it came down to was a lot of the collaboration that was done in our classroom and in person. We were able to simulate that in an online environment with Zoom. So that worked out. But again, the struggles that we really started to face were the limitations that students did have with, say, hardware with their computer and some of those things. So with the department that I work with over at School Communication, they figured out a way to remotely access the labs. So working with the SAE students' Google Drive, they're able to upload their footage through Google Drive, transfer that footage over, launch any of the Adobe Suite applications, and be able to work with their footage remotely, which is a bit of a slow process. And if they didn't have a very good internet speed, that was a problem. But luckily, like I said earlier on, I tried to get a gauge of where the students were at with their technology and their internet speed and all of that. But we had programs like Beautiful Audio Editor and Clipchamp out there. There's a couple of other ones that allow students who are not on a regular PC or a Mac and say only have a Chromebook and they can't install the software, that these are cloud-based applications that work really well. And they tie in Beautiful Audio Editor for audio, for example, ties in directly to the Google Drive. Yes, I do. Rania, yes, as part of my class now, what I've been doing is having students go through the LinkedIn Learning tutorials at Rutgers, which is really great. Our students have free access to LinkedIn while they're a student at Rutgers. So not only do I do the video tutorials online and with editing, for example, one class that I teach, for the journalism department over at School of Communication Information, I'll run through and kind of focus on the particulars that we are specifically working with, but then I also have them go through the LinkedIn Learning and take notes, and some of the quizzes as well is based on some of those technical aspects that they will talk about in there too. I found that the Premiere Pro and Audition courses are really good. I've also supplied students with alternatives if they don't have access to Adobe and they can't get access to Adobe, which luckily most students were able to do, but there were one or two that still didn't. So we showed them beautiful audio editor. I had to create a custom video for that, but Audacity, for example, was a really great alternative to using Audition if for some reason they couldn't use that. So yeah, Premiere is great. Oh yes, and Resolve. So DaVinci's Resolve is an editing, color. You can work with audio in there, and that is free. There's a download for Resolve that's free. There's also Avid Pro Tools and Avid Media Composer. They're called Avid Media Composer First and Pro Tools First. Those are also free downloads. And yes, the quizzes are graded. Our quizzes are graded. So we do graded quizzes. But they're focused. The quizzes. Well, I'm also teaching online at Mason Gross with David Sperling as well in another course. I teach one unit, Dave teaches the other unit. Those quizzes, yes, are graded, and it's focused on some of the art concepts with filmmaking and editing, so they're graded a little bit on that. But then there's also the specifics of using the actual programs, understanding some of the basic shortcuts that exist already, process and workflow as well on the quizzes. Yeah, there's but mostly for a lot of the production based classes, I do have a special rubric that I use that I created to grade specific areas, focused just on the editing, focused just on the production and pre-production as well. So it's really important. The other thing that I've done too is I've had students provide feedback on their experiences on those actual projects themselves. We did one editing project I do. The students have to actually review footage and an interview and B-roll, and they have to select the best sound bites for a 3-minute piece. So say it's a 30-minute interview, they need to do a 3-minute finished piece. They actually will pick out the best sound bites, then they'll work and figure out the B-roll, and they'll create like an edit decision list prior to the edit. And then from there, they actually swap that edit decision list with another student. So that other student has to edit from another student's edit decision list. And then they work together, kind of wearing a producer and an editor hat. And they've had fun kind of going back and forth. And it's definitely been a challenge for them. And I think what it started to do was open their eyes to kind of how we work professionally, where I don't just get to make, just cut the show however I want. It gives them really some strict guidelines to work in, but then also there's another column where they make notes about what changes they made as the editor after discussing it with their partner, and going back and forth, because it's funny how some students don't put lower thirds need to go there, any credits, any opening sequence. So they have a nice back and forth going through the process. And it's about a 2-week process for them to go through all the footage, select all the footage. Then I go through the EDLs with them. We look at them together, and then we share them with the class as well. So everybody can kind of see how everybody's using the same footage, but putting a bit of a different story together. I think it kind of opens their eyes to different possibilities of ways to cut things and edit things. So yeah, definitely. I can share those rubrics. I'm fine with that. So again, I have one that's focused just on website design. I've got one that's focused just on audio editing, video production with editing, and mostly the production side of things. And it's, I just watched the previous presentation. I think mine's going to wrap up soon. But I got 2 minutes left, 48, got 1 minute left. But, trying to figure out a new way to grade. instead of just strictly points. But there's a lot of feedback, very specific feedback on a lot of things. And the video that you saw there where I was talking to a student with the audio waveforms, I make custom videos for all the students showing them what went wrong. It is time consuming, but it's really cool for them to see what they're doing wrong, because I would be doing that in class with them. So it's really good in this online to be able to do that. Thank you, everybody. Any questions, email me. I will be around the whole semester. All right, take care.